Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through the industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Lale Davidson. She is an author, teacher, a storyteller. Welcome to the show, Lale.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You are welcome to the show, Lale. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit on what we are going to discuss. We'll be talking about writing, magic realism, and ghost stories. You have written them all. So I want to understand, several three novels, a couple of strange appetites, and a lot of short stories. So help us understand how do you decide on these genres, different genres from ghost stories to environment, and also help us understand about your writing process, the way you decide on the genres.
Well, I don't really decide on the genre. I write towards what fascinates me and what interests me and what makes me feel sort of lifted up. And that happens to be magic realism. I think that's because I grew up traveling a great deal as a child. And actually, I've been to India. In college, I went on a study tour. It was 4 months. We hit all the major cities. And I think it was coming back from that trip that I discovered Salman Rushdie, Midnight's Children. So between Salman Rushdie and I had also lived in South America. So Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude, those genres, they spoke to me. And so it wasn't like a choice. They chose me.
Right. So tell us about your books. If those books chose you, then tell us about those books so that, people know exactly what you write, why you write, and how you write.
Well, thank you. I have a book of short stories, Strange Appetites, which is nice and short, and they're very short stories. So that's fun if you don't have a lot of time. And those tend to be kind of the strangest ones. They're really the most magical in the sense that like one of them is about a woman who has been tucked inside the body of her sister all her life. And when they operate on the sister's heart because it's broken, she's released and there's a conflict there. She doesn't really want to be released. So, I feel like there's an analogy there. There's to sometimes how we feel with our older siblings, sort of swallowed up by them, swaddled up by them. So that's my book of short stories. My first novel, Blue Woman Burning, is semi-autobiographical. It's about children, the children of this extraordinary woman named Eustacia, who she's very inventive, but she's also kind of benignly neglectful of her children. And she vanishes in this mysterious way on the Altiplano, the high plain between Chile and Bolivia, as they're driving home. And the rest of the story is about the adults trying to deal with this strange vanishing and the impact that it has on the various children. So it's a book that deals with mental illness and also with my situation of having grown up in different cultures and what it's like. I imagine that many people in India can connect to this, that feeling that that you're part of many different cultures and also in a weird way, not part of anyone because you're in the middle somewhere. So that's Blue Woman Burning. Then I wrote Against the Grain about activists in Northern California, on the other side of the country from where I live. I live in the Northeast, trying to save the redwoods. These giant, gorgeous, amazing trees that are like 300 feet tall and wider than a car. And they're trying to save them from a lumber company that's basically trying to liquidate them, turn them into cash by cutting them down. And there's a strong history of activism in that region. And in that, the trees have a voice. I really wanted to give the trees a kind of believable voice that wasn't silly and didn't sound like a human being. And then finally, I wrote Beyond Sight, which is about my neck of the woods, Saratoga Springs, New York. It's a ghost story. I have a fondness for ghost stories ever since my grandmother died when she was 10, when I was 10. I always wanted her to come back to visit me. So I have a fond association with ghosts. This one takes, Saratoga Springs is a very posh kind of tourist town. I had the fortune to buy a house there before it got unaffordable. And it has this kind of Gilded Age, this uh, high Victorian society sort of background. So I took some of that history of this millionaire who came into his fortune. Of course, he would be a billionaire today, but he came into his fortune by very suspicious means. So the story is about a young woman in college, and her father has died, and is sort of mixed up with this spirit of this Gilded Age past.
Wonderful, wonderful, Lale. So I want to understand what is it that you want to convey to the world through each of your novels, each of these stories that you write.
Well, I think all of them are. I'm never writing just about the person. I'm always writing about the person in the larger society. So I think these are all very American books in a certain way. You get a sense of American culture. I think sometimes, and they're all dealing with, I would say all three of them are dealing with a certain amount of alienation that I observe Americans have. That Americans seem to be very alienated from their environment. I mean, we do have strong environmental communities, and we have wonderful national parks. So it's not like every American is alienated from their environment, but our commercial kind of industrial complex really puts a wall between us. So I would say all three novels are really dealing with what the impact of that is. Yeah. And I think, personally, the reason I write is because I find that life is very magical, even in the terrible parts of it, that it's really about perception, and that through perception, perception can be very dangerous, because if you're not connecting your perception to a community, you end up with the conspiracies and, kind of unhealthy magical thinking, and you can end up sort of vilifying people. And that's happening very much in our country. But also, if you are aware of the deep magic of simply being alive, of having these amazing, fingertips, that every single fingertip has a cell in them, and every cell has mitochondria and a nucleus and all these amazing things, that we should never lose sight of that magic, no matter what's happening around us. So I think that's partly why I write. I'm looking for that magic, to inhabit that and to share it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to understand, first, for the young writers who are looking at writing, what would you like to tell them? How should they look at writing? Secondly, a lot of people uh, may not know about magic realism. So tell us a bit about what magic realism is all about, so that people can understand this from you.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's realism, which purports to write about, reality, but that reality tends to be a very Western, non-religious reality. And there was that, that was kind of a literary movement that I would say started in the late 1800s and into the early 20th century. And it kind of took over. It was kind of like, this is the only reality. This is real, and everything else is not real. So fantasy is the opposite of that, which is like, okay, now we're going to live in a world where dragons exist and wizards exist and all kinds of magical things. And fantastical novels, or novels that are in the fantasy genre, it's a very coherent world. There's the dragons are always dragons. They don't turn into other things, or the rules of the world are consistent. Magic realism is a kind of a hybrid genre. It arises from a clash of cultures. So there's several different realities that are sort of competing with each other, or they're interlaced with each other. They may not be competitive. So a typical example is that, everything seems like reality, like the Western modern reality, but then strange things happen, like a person bodily ascends, or someone gets shot in the street and their blood goes down the street and turns left and finds its mother. So and that was a Garcia Marquez and Salman Rushdie. And again, I think often it arises out of cultures that are oppressed by very dictatorial and brutal regimes, and the reality often becomes absurd under those regimes. And I think that this magical realism genre is a response to that. And it's also a response to, like in South America, when the Spanish came and they dominated the indigenous cultures, there was a certain amount of intermingling. And so then you had both this kind of Catholic magical thinking, and then you had this indigenous spiritual thinking, and those blended. So I think magic realism is a blending of realities.
Wonderful. So for young people who are looking at writing, how should they look at, should they get too much stuck in looking at what genre they are writing, or should they just write?
I think just write what pleases you, write towards the things that draw you, that feel essential to you. And don't worry about, at first, when you write, what I would say to young writers is that, writing happens in layers, so you don't try to write the whole thing in one sitting, because there's too much going on in your brain to get it all down. And it can be so that I recommend to write fairly quickly. You write your first terrible draft, your down draft or your bad draft, and then you rest, you walk away, and then you come back and you look at it and see, what can I do with this? So I always think, you both are writing about the things that demand that that demand that you be right about them in your life. But, and that first draft, you don't worry about audience at all. You're just listening to you, or you listen to the energies of the world that are moving through you. Then when you come back to revise, then you want to start thinking about, who is my audience? What is this? What kind of story is this? Is there a genre that this fits into? Are there rules to the genre that I should maybe be thinking about, just so that I can be understood better? But so it's really important to keep a separation. Start with writing for yourself and for that mystical connection to the universe that you feel. And then later you can start thinking about, okay, how can I actually reach my audience? But if you think about the audience first, you're going to get sort of alienated from yourself and sort of out of touch with yourself and out of touch with the energies that move you. So that's why, start with yourself and then move out.
Right, Lale. Now, a lot of times now we are living in the age of artificial intelligence, and it can write lots of things at a much, much faster rate. And people are using it to churn out so much of writing that Amazon had to put a stop that you can't upload 3 books in a day. Beyond that, you cannot upload 3 books in a day.
Yeah.
Amidst all these things, when you are writing, someone may just get tempted to, because AI can write faster, it can, fill all the knowledge gaps that you may have. So how should they look at artificial intelligence? Should they get tempted, or should they not?
This is a really wonderful question, because like all tools, tools can be used for good or for bad. That the tool itself is not really the problem. It's the human being using it and how they're using it. When I heard about this, before, and then we expected it to arise or to be released in 5 years. And then suddenly it was upon us. As a teacher, as a community college professor, I was terrified of, like, what was this going to mean? How was I going to be able to tell if my students' work was their own? But from the first moment that it showed up in a student's writing, it was crystal clear that it was a machine and not a person. So now I'm sure AI will get more clever, but I would say, so let me, first of all, AI is really good at writing gorgeous sentences that say absolutely nothing because it's a machine. But they're
Right.
beautiful sounding. So it's very good for advertisements and public relations, because what is that? Well, that's what public relations is, beautiful language that doesn't really say anything. So so it's great. Like, go ahead, use it if you're trying to write some promotional material. But be aware of the fact that it's a lot of fluff that doesn't really say anything. It's going to repeat itself and make stuff up that isn't true. So, I had a student who wrote a paper quoting the book we read, and the AI just made up the quotes. And of course, the student didn't realize that because they hadn't read the book. So, but it was crystal clear to me. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about it taking over, because I don't think human beings want to read what machines wrote. Human beings are interested in other human beings. So what I think is we need to make sure that laws are passed that if you did use AI to write the book, that you have to say so. And what I am doing is that I'm adding to my author introduction that no AI was used in the production of this book. So again, that becomes an asset. So that's that. But that said, I don't think it's totally cheating to use it. Like, you might use AI. Let's say you're thinking about let's say you fell down and you hurt your knee, your character fell down and hurt their knee, and you want to find out, you want AI to give you some different descriptions of what knee pain might be like. You would put that into AI. It'll give you some choices and then you choose. I think that's in the realm of fair. I think that's like doing research or opening a thesaurus where we look up for synonyms and things like that. I use the computer a lot in my writing, in this, not AI so much, but let's say I have something set in a New York City pub or bar, and I don't want to just invent it. I might actually go with my Google Maps and look at a street and find a bar and then find some photographs of it and go in. So I don't think that's cheating. That's just extended my research range. And I think AI can be used in that fashion.
Wonderful. Wonderful. You have explained that part very well. And in fact, if intelligently used, artificial intelligence can be a very good thing in any situation. But yes, now we need to declare it as we go along. People would want to understand that. And even it is good in terms of copywriting. Copyrights, because if you don't, because all that creation is part of the humongous things that the AI has learned from different writings that has been fed into it. That's only language learning that it has done.
Right. So you could end up sort of accidentally plagiarizing because AI may have lifted a line from Garcia Marquez and you didn't realize that. So that's I wouldn't I'd be wary of that. But
Absolutely.
the other thing is, I did try to use it to write some marketing material for myself. And I think it created more work for me because it gave me all these different options and made it very hard for me to choose. So I'm not sure it really saved me any time. On the other hand, a friend of mine, an alumna from the high school I went to, said, could you massage this language on our website and see if you can make it sound better? And I loved what AI did with that. Like, it just had a much better sense of what you need to do to appeal to your audience. Like I said, I think it's good for marketing, not
It is
art.
good. Absolutely. It is good for marketing, and people would want to read real human beings and not a machine. So be that as it may, there is much to learn about artificial intelligence as they learn more about us. But in terms of a author, what should they do in terms of their writing? Should they write for themselves what they want, or should they write for the market? How does that work? How should they look at this part?
Well, I guess it sort of depends on why you're writing. I mean, so again, the first draft should always be for you, but then later you might want to consider your market. If you really want to make some money, then you want to look at, like I said, sort of the genres and the rules of the genres, because I think that's where the money is. It's in the thrillers and the romance novels. And so if you want to make money, then you sort of have to know what the genre, what the tropes are, both so that you can use them and also so you know how to renew them and do, so that they're interesting. That said, I find that sort of boring. Like, again, it's sort of alienating and it's not really very interesting to me. And the only reason I would like to earn money as a writer is so that I can keep writing, so I don't have to have another job to support myself. So I found that for me, thinking about publishing was destructive to my creative process. It really inhibited me. And
Right.
when I got much more creative and prolific when I let go of worrying about the market. Then I was able to write a lot more. So I think the more you write and the more you send your work out, the more likely you are to get published. And so then keeping your motivation alive is really important. So for me, any concern that I had for becoming famous or recognized or making money or accepted just shut down my creative flow. So it was very bad for me. I got these 3 novels written in 3 years. Partly they had been written over 10 or 20 years, so the 3 years was just the revising of them. But that was when I let go of the desire to be published and just tried to be true to what the material was, what was it asking me to do? What was the problem that it had presented? What was it trying to say? And when I really focused on that, my creative energy was more profound and prolific.
Right, right. There is something called the writer's block, and one of the things that they said that artificial intelligence will help you get over this writer's block. What is your take on this?
Interest
Should you depend on artificial intelligence, or should you let the block be there for some time so that it helps you rejuvenate and then you come out with the new story idea, the original idea? What is your take on this?
I think you could try both ways. Personally, I've had a lot of I've struggled with writer's block for a long time. So for me, the way out of the writer's block was, one, letting go of those external motivators, but the other was playing, allowing myself to play and listening to the block. So if I started to write a story and some part of my brain was like, no, I don't like that. If you go, okay, well, what don't you like about it? And then try something new, try it a different way. So for example, I have found that changing the point of view can be very liberating. So let's say you started writing in first person, and you run into kind of like a block, like it just doesn't want to go anywhere. If you try changing it to third person or to another character in the story, even, sometimes that will open things up and the story will just fly right out of you. So I think, so I would say start with listening to the block. What's the problem? Try something different. Walk away. We call it procrastination, but let's say you're writing I have a plant that needs a little, it's got some pests on it that needs some careful scrutiny. As I'm carefully scrutinizing this plant and killing all the insects, the back of my mind, my unconscious mind, is that the wheels are turning and solving problems. So often what seems procrastination is really just letting that unconscious mind do its work. And then you come back and you're like, aha, I got the idea. So that would be number one. But yeah, AI, I think, could be used. I find that the blank page is the scariest part of writing, like opening it up and having that blank page. I try to avoid that blank page. And when you get to be my age, that's easy to do because you've amassed so much, kind of sketchy writing that I almost never have to face the blank page. If I don't have an idea, I can just open up my notebook and there's a bunch of ideas. And I find, for me, working with scribbles that are already there is easier. I like to revise. So I think you could use AI to provide you with scribbles and ideas, and then you make it yours. And I think that's legitimate.
Wonderful. There is much to understand about writing. There is much to learn about writing. And so
Yeah.
those who want to learn much about all these things from you, understand these things, and also about your novels, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, thank you. Well, they can go to my website, which is laledavidson.com. So Lale Davidson .com. You'll find the links to my books there. And then all my books were published by Red Penguin Books. So you could also Google, you have to Google the titles and my name because Amazon doesn't understand my first name. They want to call me Lake. So sometimes you won't find it on Amazon, but you'll find it also on Barnes and Noble and, a lot of independent platforms. And I do have one audio. I did make an audio book of Strange Appetites, and I'm working on reading the other books and making some audio tapes. Those should be coming out in the next year or so.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, it was a pleasure.
Same here. Same here.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.